see if I can find it. There you go. So today we are, I'm not sure, can you all see that? Yeah? Oh, cool.
You see a black screen.
Yeah.
Is sharing now?
It's got your name.
Nope.
Up there it is. We got
No, there we are. Okay, so now.
It's been a bit slow. Today we're looking at mammoth circles of Ukraine. And I wanted to use Carl's sort of nice little introduction that he used on Tuesday to start this off. So the fact that I'm talking about mammoth circles in Ukraine and I'm showing you the United Kingdom more or less in the prehistoric period, it seems like a weird connection, but I think it was a very nice connection to sum things up. So this links with the 20,000 years ago formation of the Bristol Channel. So a group of people who lived in Glamorgan ran by this area. So obviously you've got Flatholm and Steepholm. They would have been complete lands at the time. There was no water in that area. So people could easily walk through to Somerset area. And there was a group that of Glamorgans that lived there, people who lived in Glamorgan that lived there, and they were also seeing a lot of different types of animals to what we see today, especially the mammoth. And in the summer months in this area at this time, it was between 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, so very cold. And mammoths would graze where the Bristol Channel was. And you obviously now, from what was left from that land, is now Flatholm and Steepholm, which is related to history in so many different ways. But this group is, they want to go to England, so they go to England. But in the time, they had, if a family member had died while they were travelling there, it would make more sense to, rather than just waste the individual and leaving any remains to sort of trace back to them, it would probably be more better for them to just eat that person. So there was cannibalism at this time. And that just shows that there was just no room for waste, more or less, especially because of safety of others. If you're leaving a trace behind, it might be easier to track you from anything that might come and kill you, i.e. wolves. So if you bury the body, then the wolf would know then, and their idea is that the wolf would have an easy feast, whereas they could have an easy feast. So that was the logic behind it. It was just better to eat loved ones rather than to just leave them there for some other animal. And this then relates to hunting of mammoths. So if there was mammoths in this area, with how big mammoths are, I think I have a picture with how big they are. They're very big. You can see from the size of the trees. They're very big animals. So it would probably be better to hunt them and use them for multiple different types of purposes, such as you could pull out all the guts and live inside the mammoth while it's still warm. Way to keep warm, especially in this very cold climate. So that was one way of using it. You'd obviously use it for food and for clothes, and the ivory and the bones. So you can get a lot out of this animal, and this sort of leaves it to be an animal that has symbolism of waste not, want not, really. You don't really waste, and I think they become a symbolism of a very important figure for living in this time period. So the reason why that links into Ukraine now is because we're talking about mammoth circles and how mammoths are utilised in this area as well, but in a completely different way, and in a very way that's very eyebrow raising, I think, are very advanced as well. So I'll be talking about sites that are along this river here, the Dnieper River. And you know, you have to be very careful with archaeological findings. You find that when you're looking at this one, there's a lot of science that dominates this type of archaeology, and so you come out with a lot of articles that have lots of words that some of the experts probably don't even understand themselves. So it's also trying to read the article and go through and check with all the lingo, so to speak, to know that what's going on, really. So I think that's another thing that can be quite off-putting with people knowing about this area, is because of the scientific lingo that goes with it. But what you find in this area is that mammoth bone dwellings are a very early type of housing, which was constructed by the they say the upper Paleolithic hunter-gatherers that was in Ukraine at this time. So a mammoth, which is also known as the woolly mammoth, which is the Mammothus prigogenus. That's his fancy name, if you want to call it that. This is a type of an enormous, now extinct ancient animal. It was almost like an elephant. Like I've said, it was hairy, it had large tusks. And this was very big compared to an adult, and they roamed most of the world at this time, especially continents in Europe and North America, and they died out in the late Pleistocene area. But when you look at mammoths, you realise that they were used for numerous amounts of resources, especially with the archaeology in this area. This is why this archaeology is so important, because it allows you to look at mammoths and see how important they were to these people in terms of survival, especially in an area like this where it has extreme cold climates as well. So yeah, when you're looking at this, there's a lot of challenges to it. Obviously, there's you have a lot of, I think, what is a criticism of me when I'm reading the articles about this is that obviously people who are looking at this, that they would specialise maybe on this topic, and they're the ones that have researched the most out of it. And when I was thinking about this morning, I had my final module lesson for one of my modules, which made me feel a little bit sad, because I don't know, it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable leaving education, but we had a discussion because I have an MA conference for my dissertation, and they said, yes, you are the specialists on your topic that you've picked. You are the ones that have done the most research in it. However, when you're presenting it, you've got to understand that your audience will be able to understand methodologies and maybe certain words and ways of thinking. However, you also got to think of how they're not a specialist in that area, so you might have to explain terminology, and I think that's my criticism with these articles, is that they almost expect anyone to understand this lingo straight away. And I think that can just be very off-putting when you just look at it online. But once you get your head around them, I think, you know, you can easily sort of point out, especially with someone like me, a lot of my research, I've got to dumb things down just to understand it first, and then I can expand on it further. But you find that in this area, mammoths were used for numerous types of things, such as meat. Their skin was used for clothes, or even argued to be put on top of these huts as well. They were also argued to fuel fires, and also building materials for houses in this area. So a bone dwelling is typically circular or oval in structure. See if I can get well, you can see the outline of that one, so it's circular there, but that's what it looks like. Sorry, they've gone all jumbled up, the pictures. I thought I'd put them in a chronological order, but again, the laptop doesn't like me. But this is how a recreation of it, so to speak. So you can see that they use the tusks at the entrance and as some of the support as well. And you can see that they've used the skin on top as almost like a cover from all the harsh weather as well. And this was a very effective way of creating houses in this area. And this has also led to a discussion on whether they were permanent or not. But I think with something with this amount of dedication and the amount of mammoths found, I think it just points that it was a permanent settlement rather than it being a temporary thing. But they had stacked large mammoth bones, often modified to allow them to be lashed together or implanted into the soil. And the interior was typically found at a central hearth or several scattered hearths, and the hut was generally surrounded by numerous pits full of mammoth and other animal bones as well in some sites. They have found that ashy concentrates with flint, for example, in these artifacts we had to represent middens. Many of the mammoth bone settlements have a lot of ivory and bone tools found inside them as well. So you're finding more than just living dwellings as well. You're finding evidence, I think, of an industry, their own type of industry, really. And this has brought scholars to call for combinations of mammoth bone settlements to be looked at further. But you see that there's lots of evidence of butchering areas and flint workshops, which is in one site that I will further go on to discuss. But the bone dwellings have argued to be problematic by some scholars because of the dates. Some have said that it's between 20,000 to 14,000 years ago. And then they have been redated to bring it closer to 14,000 to 15,000 years old. And I saw that there was an article that tried to bring it down even more specifically than that, which was between 14,850 to 14,315 years ago. So you can see how this is a settlement, I think, that has seen these are settlements around that have seen a change in the way that they've been analysed and discussed, and I think is something that's still taken our attention today. The oldest ones that have been found in the Molodova site is said to be a Neanderthal occupation, and then there was some dated a little bit later than that have been thought to be the modern man, so the Homo sapien. So again, I think that blows the whole argument that these were temporary settlements as well out of the water. If you've clearly got evidence there of people. This also leads then to another discussion of these people that we'll discuss further. I don't know if you probably might have gathered some sort of idea from now, but the fact that you've got these dwellings and there's quite a few of them, and is it this site here? This one specifically, so Kostenki 11, so the dwelling 3, that has been the largest one and the one that's been discussed in great detail, really, and you can also see the pits as well on the side. Sorry, I've just gone off on a bit of a tangent, but you see how big they are, that there would have been more than one dwelling in this area. What I'm trying to say with the use of technology and different animals being killed there and pits and etc., I think it just sort of points us towards the fact that maybe this wasn't a temporary area to live in, and in fact might have been earlier forms of community, earlier than what we were seeing in Britain, which has also led then to something that's quite a revolution for anyone studying this time period, because you just ultimately think that we were people that were hunters, and they only stuck to their own family, and they might expand a little bit with someone from another family sort of joining together, but this is ultimately different groupings of people, different families living together all at one, which is it's very interesting. I think this just shows not only are their dwellings advanced, but the way they think and the way they behave is as well, because I think to have a community you have to have communication. But back to these dwellings first. So like I said, there's a lot of debate on these sites, and this has led to a lot of confusion on how many mammoth bone sites have actually been discovered and actually identified correctly as well. All of them have a massive, large quantities of mammoth bone as well. So some people seem to have debated on where they get that material from. Are they going out there to hunt these mammoths, or are they going out there to, or are they going near, say, a graveyard for mammoths and taking what they need there? Because especially what was discussed on Tuesday is how a lot of these bones it seem to be all different, and some of them are obviously evidence of picking and choosing as well. So that's very interesting. But I think it all relates to the waste not, want not sort of thing, where you don't want any waste, you just take what you can get at this time, especially when it's cold. What is very interesting about this place that has been discussed is that when we were talking about Greenland, for example, with the Vikings, when they obviously when we discussed this a very while back, I think it was one of the first things in my book, that when I started back here, and they discussed how due to the cold the Vikings wasn't prepared, and they were living in filth really. They were eating, sleeping, you know, going to toilet where they lived, and that was because of how cold they were. They weren't really making any sense or seeing any rational thoughts, and so the hygiene went out the window. But these people, there has been no evidence of that at all. It seems that they have pits for different things. Some of them have been for meat storage, some of them have been for waste, and some of them have even been for just burnt remains as well. But when you look at these dwellings, I think it makes it clear that this is an area that isn't covered in a lot of wood, etc., and so it would probably be much easier to create structures out of mammoth bone. I did read that one article claimed that these structures were possibly wooden in the past. However, again, there seems to be no evidence of that, especially in the burnt pits that they have. There's a lot of burnt mammoth bone. However, there's not a lot of burnt wood there, and that raises a question. There was a little bit of burnt wood, but from what I could gather, they were using it as almost like fire starters and fire lighters, and then taking back whatever they could to reuse it, because it was such a precious item really. But like I said, they were circular dwellings of these mammoth bones, and the earliest example of architecture really, and I think it is very impressive to see. Archaeologist Alexander Pryor from the University of Exeter published a new study as well, claiming that that one of these sites that we were discussing, I believe, is this site.
You've gone, Jess.
You've disappeared, Jess.
You're frozen, Jess. What do you want to do?
Who in insanity because of the cold, because they clearly knew how to deal with it, especially with the skin as well. I think they were utilizing the mammoth in a way that they were definitely seeing a lot of benefits from it as well. And one thing that's quite interesting about the animal skins is that once it dries up in this cold weather, it's almost the cold where it blows your face, and it takes your breath away almost, and everything dries up because of how cold and dry it is. That could have been used then.
You've gone again, Jess. Unless it's me.
No, it's are we all
A mammoth graveyard, etc.
yeah. Jess?
But this was
Oh.
a pit. They had loads of deep pits on the outer perimeters of the dwelling, so by here, and they were quarried for loeses. So what is it? This stuff here for construction, but afterwards they were also used for food, fuel, and storage. And what I mean by that loeses, it's almost like
No.
You've gone again.
Mind she's recording this. Can anyone text Carl and tell him?
the one that they found in these sites. I think it does make you think, how did they know it was there exactly, really? But it showed that there was no layers. When you have archaeology, you always think that there's always layers to archaeology, and that's how we're able to date things. However, this was not the case with this, and I think that was another thing that panicked archaeologists, because it was not the it was quite an anomaly for archaeologists, really. And I know we look for anomalies in archaeology, really, to bring about a perspective compared to what we already have in scholarship. But this was an anomaly because it just didn't follow the same pattern as that we're used to, I think, in terms of archaeology, and the fact that there's no layers just made it even more of a nightmare to date. That's why radiocarbon dating had come in. But this is an area that's had a lot of performance from early humans in the past. And they've shown us a performance where they were actually working as a very strong community, and they were using a large amount of mammoths used. So we discussed we discussed on Tuesday how many would they have used, that based on looking at these types of photos, that was them excavating one. But things like this, for example, looking at this reconstruction, how many mammoths would we use? And we discussed that maybe 2 mammoths to about 10 plus mammoths used. But I've also read some more debates on that, where someone was saying that it was only 149 used to build these dwellings. But the one dwelling that's coming to hello?
We're
Can you hear
having,
us? Yes. You're frozen again.
Can you hear me?
we're
See
having
you. Frozen.
Okay, hang on. Can you hear me now? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was my laptop overheating then. I apologise. I had the charger plugged in.
Jess, can I make a suggestion? For your bandwidth, if you cut some of your mics, you might be able to get a little bit more thingamajig. So if you cut half the mics,
Yes.
you want me to cut them?
Yeah, go on, Carl. I'm not really sure. Apologise for that, everyone.
Okay, well, so we'll cut. Okay, and we'll So you've got just keep. If Bill's got any problems, then just obviously he can speak. So yeah.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah. Apologies about that. I don't know whether anyone saw the same thing as me, but my screen went completely black and I panicked then, but I could hear all your voices, which is what was confusing me. Yeah, so I think what we've gathered here from these sites is that recycling is important, especially in this time period. And this recycling is not just important, but is also a welcomed resource in cold, dry, frosty landscapes, because you need everything around you to survive ultimately. And there's lots of bones being used for 4 buildings. That they believe that it was 149 mammoths being used, due to finding all these remains from mammoths and using the skeletal pan that they had to differentiate how many were used. But this has also brought a lot of criticism and debate, because some scholars were arguing that this was these are people that were very barbaric, and therefore they were going out there and killing these mammoths. However, that would take a lot of time and energy. I think, especially for 149 mammoths being used for 4 buildings, it would take a lot of time and energy, and I think it's not very useful for that time period. So what was argued was that they were not all about killing. They were just sort of seeing if there was a dead animal, i.e. mammoth, and just using it there and then. However, this has sort of led to, maybe with the amount that they had, was it just loads of mammoths roaming about at the same time, or was there actually a graveyard nearby that they were going to and picking and choosing what they wanted? But I think that you relate this back to the beginning, where I was saying about loved ones with the group of people living in Glamorgan, that if a loved one had died, just leaving it there would be an easy meal for the wolf, so it would probably be better for them to eat them. It's that sort of idea, is that if they leave the mammoth there, then that would be a feast and maybe some more resources for someone else, which is not very effective. So this is, I think, a way of disposing animals in a proper way. I think in a way that we can just reuse everything, and I think the way they were able to create these buildings is even more fascinating as well. But there was, in terms of what they find at the site, there was various forms of art, etc., which we'll go further on into. However, I just want to discuss some of these earlier sites in a little bit more detail. So that, like I said, this one structure, where is it? Ooh, I don't know. Well, anyway, we'll look at this one, because this is the one that's sort of brought to discussion, because this is the one I want to talk about. It's the biggest one here, and you can see the woman sat in the middle, clearly looking at something in a book about it, or writing notes about it. But you can see how big this is compared to this woman. This has led to this one particular dwelling to be argued as not as a dwelling, but maybe a ritualistic building as well. However, Alexander Prior from the University of Exeter, he basically said that there was no evidence at the moment of ritualistic ceremonies being done at the site. However, that's what he believes it is. So it is an interesting interpretation, especially because the reason why they argue that is that this is the biggest one compared to the other dwellings that have been found at the site as well. But this site here, the Kostenki site, is very large, and it has a few simple abodes, but the one that's being pointed at here as well is also the biggest site that we just looked at, which has a religious significance. So you see this in Paul Barnes' 1995 book, which was called The 100 Great Archaeological Discoveries. He discusses this in some detail, and he describes them really as the earliest examples of monumental architecture as evidence of increased social complexity and status differentiation from the final phase of the Ice Age. So he discusses that quite a bit in his book, and I think it would be quite interesting to look at. But I think this has had a lot of attention from a lot of scholars and academics as well. But like I said, this is from the Dnieper River of Ukraine, and it's near the Moriva, southern Poland area as well. So the best known one is this big dwelling here, is called Kozaski 11, and it's on the Don River on the eastern margin of the central Russian upland as well. So it's 400 kilometers south of Moscow as well. So one of the first of these structures had been discovered by archaeologist A.N. Brodzivachev in 1951, and then it was excavated further in the 1960s, and this was preserved in the State Archaeological Museum in Kozanki. And they've taken great pride in showing this off and preserving it, I think, and educating people more about it as well. But they've discussed 3 structures. So the first one was discovered in 1951 and excavated in 1960. The second structure was found in 1970. But the third structure is the one that's been discussed the most, and it's near the museum building. And excavations in that was taken out in 2015 and 17. And it exposed this circular structure with 3 large pits, and it was well preserved. And the museum consists of 26 sites of this period, and it's something that they are devoted to as well, which is nice to see. But this is conserved on this one site here that we're looking at is conserved inside the museum building as well in 1979. So the third one has a bigger diameter as well, and it has lots of rubrified loesses mixed in with burnt bone and charcoal. Alexander Pryor discussed in his paper that he published that the results from the charcoal samples, burnt bone and microlithic particles were used in a method of analysis called flotation, and that was the first that the circle had been sampled in this way. So this these sites are seeing, I think, different uses of technology, and I think you're seeing a development in archaeology. But when they looked at the radiocarbon dating that was produced on this site, it produced, like I said, this is where the discussion came. It produced a date between 25,000 to 24,000 BC, and then when they looked at that compared to the human occupation and the charcoal, the site, they felt like the site was strongly supported into that period, because of chronological links with the other pieces of evidence that they had found. But the evidence had sort of nodded towards the third structure in this area was the oldest one, and this was thought to be done by the Neanderthals. And the reason why they argue that is because the Neanderthals had done one in the Moldova area of Ukraine, and that was about 44,000 years old. And like I said, this one article that I read had argued that before the Mammoth was being used, they were using conical domed hut structures covered by animal hides and plant material and grass, but it was using wooden supports. Well, if they were finding little evidence of wood, surely that would say to me that they were having a lack of wood at this time. So I think, I don't know, it would be interesting to see if they found some evidence suggesting that However, it's debated, and it's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at this period and what they've left behind, really, and it's very spectacular. But like I said, this one is saying that there has ceremonial monuments here, maybe temples. But like I said, this Alexander Priora, he wasn't sure on that. On if there was any evidence of ritualistic beliefs as of yet. He said, but it was something that he would hope to look out for in the future, which I think it would be something to definitely keep an eye out and focus on a little bit more. But I think that this is a site of a large sample of abodes that can give us, you can look at the way they lived and definitely the different industries that they might have had there. But I think what is interesting to take from this is that they were able to communicate and live together like one community, really, and it was different groups of people. And I think that's revolutionary in itself, because little family groups are normally seen in archaeology, not these big communities for that time. And I think it really sort of grounds us really to look at how advanced other areas were compared to us in the time period. But like I said, these pits had been used for multiple things that can show us the different use of mammoth bones. So like, for example, we have obviously the evidence of the dwellings, and the evidence of the skins being used for the dwellings, maybe the evidence of the skin being used as fuel in these pits, but we also have evidence of storage pits and pits for waste as well. And that's just from looking at animal waste or anything that's been dried out, so to speak, and burnt in these pits. But this is a discussion, I think, that's really sort of been an eye-opener because of how advanced, especially because you don't really expect this to be an area, a time period of such sophistication in terms of building structures like this. And we'll go in further to another site after this, where I'll discuss a lot more different types of artifacts found there that can bring us closer to the perspective of these people. But I think what's important to notice is that this third dwelling that they had found in this site as well, it was the one with the biggest diameter, and it just showed us different things that we can see that they used either for ceremonial beliefs or trade, etc. But I think the ceremonial aspect of it being a ceremonial place of worship is quite interesting, and I think that further solidifies the argument that this was a community if they had a big place for worship, or even if this was a big building to which was almost well, you could almost argue like a prehistoric form of an institution that would help run the area. So I think you could get quite a lot of different interpretations from that and discussion, which would be quite interesting. But I think at the moment the discussion is still in its early forms of what was being used and done on this site, but they definitely found out that there were animals being butchered and consumed on this site, and that they were using every single part of the animal as much as they could. And after the break, I also want to look maybe further into some different ways of analysing the information and the evidence that they had in front of them as well. So I'll stop sharing. I think I'm going to ask everyone the questions, and then we'll go for about 10 minutes and then come back. So Bill, is there anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Yeah, they're looking at the picture of the Konstanki II dwelling. I know we got different ideas of what the interpretation is, but what strikes me is the way the bones are laid out in an annular ring form suggests to me this was an open door larder. The animals, the mammoths, were butchered elsewhere. The meat was eaten, consumed. Then the bones were broken up and brought back and laid out in this annular ring formation as a future store of jelly bone marrow. So they could actually get access to it in an easy way rather than just pile it up as a little mountain, etc. And then as and when we just go out then and have the sweet chaps on the menu, we'll have jelly bone marrow. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I like that.
That might be nonsense, you know, but that's what sort of strikes me. How can they be dwellings?
Yeah.
They're not, are they? They're stores for some reason. They're stores. Because
Yeah.
all the bones there are not huge stones, sort of huge bones. If they are, they've been broken up in smaller sections, particularly those which they know will contain the richest source of marrowbone jelly. That's what comes to me, anyway.
Yeah,
so
I think that's quite an interesting interpretation, and I think it's only fair, especially when now that there's been a discussion that they don't think that all of them have been dwellings either. No, thank you for that, Bill. Dal, anything that you'd like to ask or add before we go on the break?
Oh yeah, and as Carl would say, you won't shut me up now. No, really, really fantastic, Jessica. It's one of those eras that got me into history and archaeology. In the 80s, I picked up a book by an authoress called Jean M. Auel. The series was called Earth's Children, and she finished the last one, I think, round about 2006, something like that. So it's, you know, but it was all about the Ice Age. And this is one of the main areas that she based the characters in. Okay, might have been a bit of a soap opera, but she had done her research, and she cited a lot of these historians and experts and things in the book. You know, she'd been there, she'd seen these dwellings and things, and she based the characters around them and, you know, weaved a story. But in those books, it really gives an insight into how they might have lived and how they could have lived. I mean, I see the dwellings as pit dwellings, whereas the bones are just the structure above ground. They dig a pit if they could, you know, probably in the summer when, you know, the ground wasn't frozen, which would have made it warmer. There might have been about 3-4 families living in each, in different sections. I think the only person who might have had a single dwelling might have been the sort of shaman sort of character. But yeah, it goes into, you know, the hunting of mammoths. Mammoths were used. They used bends in rivers because when they flooded, you know, after the winter, animals would get washed down, and bones were a resource because trees were, well, they were rare. But I think if you go beyond the little bit of a soap opera that some of these books are, they are good books to read to get a little bit of an insight into the Ice Age and how people lived. I mean, they do follow two characters who travel across Europe to the Lascaux region of France, which is where they end up settling with the cave paintings and things. But it's absolutely fascinating, that time period, and the research that she's put in is marvelous. Right, the other thing, I said you wouldn't shut me up. Something possibly for the future. Looking at that map of Ukraine, there's a town called Donetsk.
Yeah.
I think you'd see it as Donetsk. Now, the original name of that place was Huzovsky.
Yeah. And
Welsh people settled there to start the mining and do a lot with mining. And if you go to Swansea Museum, the Maritime Museum, they do have a wall dedicated to it. So that's possibly something for the future, how the Welsh settled Russia. Well, Ukraine.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But no, I'm fascinated with this sort of Ice Age era because we don't know much about it. And as you mentioned, you know, modern humans were in contact with Neanderthals. And to think that, you know, 20,000 years ago, they were still around. Well, they're still around in our DNA, but you know, I mean, I've been up the valleys.
Yeah.
Sorry if anybody's from the valleys. Not my state, mind, Bill. Yeah, but it's so fascinating to think that that time period, which I would look at as being the start of the modern age, we had another species living alongside of, you know, so absolutely fantastic. Okay, thank you.
You know, thank you for
I'll shut up now.
And I like the little reference to the literature as well. There's something I might look into because I like that sort of style.
Yeah,
no, but thank you for that.
Yeah, AUEL, owl. And it's Jean, JEAN, and it's initial in the middle, M. Jean M. Owl. Really nice books, nice read.
Yeah.
But you know, once you get rid of the little soap opera, you can pick out some of the research.
Sometimes you can enjoy a little bit of that as well.
Yes.
But thank you for that, Del. Thank you. Henry, anything that you'd like to ask or add before the break?
Just a quick one. It was just building on what Bill was saying about the site. If I understood it correctly, you've got one large structure and a number of smaller structures. I mean, could the larger structure be like the group community living area, and the smaller structures, the stores and work areas, etc.?
No, definitely. I think that's definitely a very valid argument, especially with what we'll go into after the break with the different types of things that they found there. I think you could relate the evidence to arguing that. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
But besides that, really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne, anything that you'd like to ask or add? Anne, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Anne.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh,
there you go.
Oh no, I was only going to say, none of us know much about, I don't know much about the Paleolithic era, and, you know, except cave art, basically, you know, and it's that, and so I thought everyone lived in caves, you know, and then they came out and they went to the Mesolithic and they started living in tents, you know. So this is something completely different. The bone people who lived in bone huts. I don't mind, you know. I think it's fascinating.
No, definitely, Anne. I think I thought the same thing as you. And then when you look into it, you realise that there's more evidence to suggest that we should be giving them more credit than what we do.
More credit, yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that, Anne.
Thank you. Yes, very good.
Pat, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Just at the very beginning, you said something about cannibalism, and I never thought about that or heard about it, and I suppose it went on, you know.
Yeah. You know, that whole logic, it probably wouldn't be something, you know, that we would follow now. Definitely 100%. But back then, I think it was just all about survival, and they saw that as maybe wasted resources given to another animal if they So it's very gruesome, but it just is able to prove the point.
Yeah, the ancestors, you know, but now it's then, you know, back then it was quite early. Yeah.
No, thank you for that, Pat. Dad, is there anything that you want to ask? I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, about the cannibalism. I mean, because I like to look at some of the more gory things on YouTube. Cannibalism sometimes is more than just I'm hungry, that's the only meat I've got. Sometimes it's about taking in the spirit of the person who's passed on and keeping it within the family or within the tribe. So a lot of cannibals eat either their enemies they've conquered or family members purely because they want to take on the essence.
Well, that's very
So,
interesting. I've never thought
it's
of it
not
like that.
just, so I don't think it's just always because it's wasted meat. It's because, we want to revere this person. The only way we can do it now is to ingest them, take them in, and then we will have this spirit in us.
Yeah. You know what? That's a very interesting.
Which I know, to me, it sort of sanitizes cannibalism in some sort of way.
Yeah, no, obviously I think nothing to sort of take on to the modern period, but very interesting interpretation
for
the past.
No, thank you. My mother would be a bit tough.
I was going to say, is anyone watching The Terror?
No.
The Terror is all about a big beast in the Arctic, and it's very, very, there's these sailors going to find the Great Passage, the Great North Passage, and they come across like the abominable snowman, and it's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
I'll get that up on catch up.
Too.
Oh wow, no, that's interesting. Right. I'm gonna go off and get a coffee. And I'll see you guys in about 10, 15 minutes. Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Turn my phone off. I think I'll have to. Oh, I've done that, haven't I?
Please all stay. No, is that none? That isn't it. How can I mute you, Anne?
Yeah.
A lot of noise going on. Some strange domestic shufflings and bangings.
She's probably putting her husband in the microwave.
Whatever's going on, that's intriguing, all these noises.
I know,
Absolutely.
either that or the washing machine.
Yeah,
Is that meal patch?
well, you know, we think it's you. What
I
are you
was
doing?
singing. I was
Oh,
singing.
That's the sleep, so thank you.
Drinking,
Oh,
drinking.
I joined a singing group online. It's can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh right.
Give us a song, then.
I'm on my phone, you see, because I can only see one person at a time. So yeah, so I joined a singing group, and it's surprising how strenuous singing is. You know, like it's only a what do you call it? What's the name of that? You know, where there's no, it's not unaccompanied, a cappella.
A cappella.
Cappella singing. So it's like you take a part and then you just keep singing it over and over again. But it's on a Monday at 6:30. And it comes from Merthyr Tydfil.
Oh.
It's a project up there.
But when everything's open again, Anne, because you're in Bridgend, there's a group, I can't remember their name, but they meet in Heronsbridge School once a week.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a rock. There's
Okay,
rock.
the cat just jumped on something and knocked everything off.
Yeah, there's the rock.
Yeah,
Rock-
there's
rock.
the rock choir.
Yeah, yeah. I've been told about it, you know,
It's
but
really good, and you know, I see them because when I'm there for governors' meetings and other bits and pieces, they're there. They've also raised some money for us, and
right.
I know a few people who go, and it's a really lovely, friendly session. It's
Yeah.
not one of those places where you have to be absolutely torn perfect.
No,
They're
yeah.
there for company.
Yeah.
They're basically there to enjoy themselves singing.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's good therapy, isn't it?
Yes.
And
He wants
my
to say hello.
Do you know? Hello, what's his name?
Danny.
Hello, Danny.
He's not ours, he's next door's.
Oh, Danny boy.
Yes. He lives with us. He's next door's, but he lives with us because they've got about 9 cats.
Oh,
A couple of
my
dogs. Goodness knows what. They've got a menagerie next door. But he's chosen to live with us.
I hope my daughter gets a neighbour like you when she moves to Cardiff, because she's got 2. She's got 2 cats. So I'm hoping that they'll find, you know, it friendly.
Oh, my neighbour works. She.
Are you there, Jeff?
Yeah, I am. I've just come back on.
My neighbour monitors the milk from the cows, and she goes round all the farms checking it and whatnot and recording it.
My friend.
And you know, you get the farm cats. She can't sort of abide them ending up in a sack, so she brings them all home. The kittens.
Oh,
that's why we've got so many cats. I tell you what, there's about 19 cats around us.
What's bloody then?
Oh, and we still got rats. They're all flipping lazy, but yeah, they're all lazy buggers.
I know. I think they're too well fed.
Yeah, too well fed.
They don't wanna fight against them. It's not their problem.
Saying that, see, we've got the pond opposite, so that draws the rats in.
Yeah, no, we get a lot of field mice, etc. We live right near a brook, and it's lots of fields. And my mum's been going ape at the moment because we put mouse traps about, and we caught one the other day. She was having the amount of bleach that was coming from the kitchen. That. I was trying to explain to her, it doesn't matter about how clean or dirty you are, that they're going to come here because of where we live.
Yes.
Keep
Yes.
you in the traps. But
Yes.
horrified she was.
What is it? Is it we're always only 12 foot away from a rat? Something like that.
Oh God.
Yeah, my dog's on the floor, so I'm quite close to it. I was a little late coming back because I was basically what had happened when I cut out. My laptop was just showing me up really, and it just went blank. It was doing it to the internet pages, but I managed to get some more images as well, such as the skeletal pan and some recreations as well, which I think also goes into quite a good discussion as well of these sites. So I'll start this slideshow now, if it wants to. Is going to, whether it likes it or not. This site was quite an interesting site to actually look at. I've shown a photo of this previously, but this is one of the oldest sites known with these mammoth circles, and you can really see how big they are and all the different types of bones, etc. And it's very impressive. But this one was thought to be the oldest one of the lot of them all, of them all, really. And I think it was interesting to have a discussion about it, because when they looked at this site in particular, they found that there was different types of tools and stone tools that was found on this site. So they found that there was simple side scrapers here and retouched blades, and they said that finding those artifacts was able to lead them to the conclusion that this was definitely Neanderthals, and that these mammoth circles were older than what they had thought this had gone before Homo sapiens. And this site, I think, was very interesting in terms of what artifacts that they were able to gather. They were able to gather 40,000 flint artifacts and 7,000 stone tools as well. And they were able to find where the flint had come from, which was the local Danister River area, and they were able to use that. But there was also 26 hearths in this that had ashy lenses, which they believed that was stone tools in amongst it, and burnt bones as well from mammoths, and there was a small proportion of other animals as well, which was quite interesting to take note of. But this is about 1,200 square meters and 3,000 square feet, if you want definite measurements of that. And this would include a pit filled with bones. It also had an area with engraved bones, and a circular accumulation of bones with tools in the centre as well. So I think that definitely could relate to what Henry and Bill had suggested, that maybe not just dwellings, but maybe different sort of structure for different things, and finding tools in the centre one, maybe that was like a tool workshop, etc. That was left there. But the recent studies had recently discussing this, that the feature was this was mostly characterized by the bone hut that they had found there, so the artifacts really didn't have that much tension. They were just a little bit of the evidence that could provide the story of this site, because when you do archaeology and history, it's the story as well of our past. And they were able to find that this was quite an old site, and this was a mammoth bone settlement, and it was older than, some are suggesting 44,000 years ago, and some are suggesting 30,000 years ago. So there's been quite a discussion and a debate about that as well, on a whole. And the development in radiocarbon dating is allowing some archaeologists and scholars to go to each one of these sites and slowly try and bring down the dates to a very smaller specific time. So like I said, the first site, the Kowarski site, it was between 24 to 26,000 years ago, and then they were able to bring it down smaller and smaller and smaller to where it was just 14,351 BC. So I think that when you're looking at the archaeology of all this, I think is important to take note of how methodologies and technologies have changed and how that's able to twist the data almost to show us different aspects of the tribe. But this is a site that is held importance because I think it just shows this continual use of these types of dwellings and how significant they were as well in terms of the cold. And I think the fact that they're so clean as well, I think there was use of pits, but I think it could also suggest that not all of these structures were dwellings again. But definitely, I think a community that's sort of going further. I think that the earliest hunter-gatherers, but it's done in a very sophisticated way for the time that it is. But I think, Karl always talks about how there's Neanderthals are always in the news, and there is something new about Neanderthals every week. And I think quite recently we were discussing how they could talk like us now, and there's now discussions that they started this almost. So yeah, I think that they were possibly going to be investigated in terms of this as well, but this dwelling was very significant in terms of that. So I just want to have a look at the recreation. So obviously I showed you this one. I think what's quite interesting is how big the entrance is really. If it was cold, I don't think you'd have an entrance that big maybe. And so some of the recreations, like the one I'm going to show you now, that was also another recreation which was quite interesting, just based on what they found at certain sites. And this is from the Mezaraki site as well, which is also what I'm going to discuss because they were able to find even more interesting things there. But I want to look at the skeletal plan, and then but first I want to look at this other recreation, which this was quite problematic, I think, when you look at it, because they show
your screen has frozen. We're still looking at the bones in the circle.
Oh, are you still looking at the bones?
Yes, and you're not moving anymore.
If everyone could mute themselves, because I'm not a host, so I can't really do it. If everyone could mute, hopefully that'll work. Can everyone see me now? Is everything okay?
Yep.
Yep, cool. So I'll start from this again. Sorry, this is another recreation that was quite problematic really when we discussed it. For starters, I think that having the bones laying out on the side by there like that, it almost seems quite I think it puts them in like a barbaric sort of way, and I think it doesn't really do them justice because, like I said, there was evidence of them being very organised and clean in their settlements. But what you can see here is that they've had it's almost like they've got a chimney, and I don't think that would be quite accurate because that would just allow all the heat to go, and if anything you'd have something where the heat would just sort of move along like a tunnel and just leave from another way. So it was quite a good stab, I guess, but I don't think it was completely accurate to it. But you can see that they're having this common theme of using these stacked up parts of Mammoth, and that's what we're coming to discuss now. So you should all be seeing a site from Mezarek here of all these different types of shaped bones, and this is what came into discussion of trying to figure out what bones they were. So when you look at all these, and you can figure out that there's definitely a tusk there. Have a look at my notes to see what else we identified there, because it's quite an interesting discussion. So they definitely think it was the tusks, because you could see that in the entrances, the supports, but also the lower mandibles is what is thought to be those weird shaped bones as well, and possibly this bone here. There was definitely femurs and humeruses and etc. all along, but what is interesting when you look at it is that the only part of it that wasn't used was this part of the mammoth, where all the ribs etc. The head, sometimes the head was even used on the outside parts of it. So I think it would be nice to see more of a definite list, maybe, or discussion on what bones is there, and I think it could help us figure out more ourselves and sort of figure out a way of looking at all the evidence that I found. There was different numbers being thrown around, but the most common number for 4 huts was about 149 mammoths being used. I think it would just be nice to have maybe a list and just sort of showing that maybe how many tusks were used and how many mandibles were used building this site, and how many skulls. Maybe we could just sort of get a better picture of that. I think it can also show us how many mammoths were actually mammoths were actually in the area. So from what you can gather here, the fact that they're not having the middle part of the mammoth, I think it just shows that they're maybe picking and choosing what parts of the mammoth that they had wanted, and that was just sort of left to maybe a conclusion of living near a graveyard, or there was just so many mammoths that living there that it was easier to just get hold of a dead mammoth quite quickly. But from the pits that we had discussed, the pits are where's the picture? The pits, the things that have all been placed on the site here that they figured out. They seem to show evidence of bone charcoal, a lot of bone charcoal that was used for fuel, and that was in abundance. But however, there was almost no wood charcoal, but the fact that they said almost none suggested there was a little bit. So there was just maybe evidence of them sort of reusing any wood that they had for as long as they could. And it just sort of shows how cherished wood is as well, especially in this area, especially if they're making things without wood. To actually have wood, it was important for fuel, and that's what it was needed for. But like I said, this has been an area that's quite interesting for the interpretations of how they've all been formed and structured and created and so on. So this next site is also another well-known site. It's called Mezarich. So it's Mezirich. And this site, as you can see, is from this picture. They seem a little bit more smaller than the other sites that I've shown you. But this was just another site that provided evidence for the argument of this was a site that showed evidence of mammoths being used for many purposes, such as food, clothes, fuel, and building material, more importantly. And this is in the middle of the Dnieper River Valley, and it's near Kiev. And this is one of the best preserved sites as well, and you can see how they've numbered each one of the bones, which is believed to be maybe the lower mandible as well, by here, and then you can see maybe sort of evidence of the thigh bone of the, I've forgotten the name of it, but the bone of the leg of the mammal. So you can see that they're using a mixture, and they're using it for all different types of support and structures. And I think the way that these bones have been layered here, I think it's a very interesting and distinctive pattern. It's almost like it's their identity being reflected through the architecture of these dwellings, or maybe even little workshops for the community. And this is a large open air site compared to the other ones. So and it has several mammoth bone huts with hearths and some pits as well mixed in with it. And they believe that this one's about 14,000 to maybe 15,000 years ago. And this was buried in beneath between 2.7 to 3.4 meters of calcareous loess. That stuff that I was talking about, this that particles etc being blown and mixed in, and that's why there's no layers, because things aren't being left on top, as things gradually being blown and creating a big deposit over time. I think what would be quite interesting is looking at maybe the methodologies as well of any archaeologists and scholars that have worked on this time, to see if they've you know, how they were able to come to find these places. I remember reading about how I'm not sure whether it was this site or the Neanderthal site, but this had come across by a local farmer. He had discovered it, and that brought attention to archaeologists. But this site in particular was the one that had evidence of tool workshops. So it had microliths inside, bone and ivory tools, including needles, and perforators and polishers, for example. There was also, so there I think you have evidence of industry as well. I'm not sure whether that would suggest maybe evidence of sort of trade in a way, where they were creating so much of it, but because there was definitely lots and lots of these different types of tools there. But I think that's something to maybe lead on to another discussion and debate on. But at the moment, as you can tell so far from this topic, this has been a topic that's been full of debate and interest, to a point where I think little things like that are put on the back burner just to find out the important things like dates. But they've also found evidence here of personal ornamentation. So again, I think also showing not just identity through architecture, there's definitely identity of this community through their ornamentation. So there was evidence of amber beads, for example, and ivory pins, and this was also suggesting maybe this is being traded as well in some sort of way. Maybe they created it, or this had come from another area nearby. But it is definitely showing that they've got some sort of either connection or craftsmanship to great extent, and especially how it's going on further. They're able to have not just items of survival, but those important ornamentations that can reflect them and their community in a way, especially when you have a look at the mobile art, which we'll discuss. But the amber beads that they had found was from the Baltic Sea, so it does show trade. There was trade going on here, so I think they're quite sophisticated in their architecture and the way they're able to create tools and not create waste. But they're also sophisticated because they're able to trade these amber beads, which have also been found at this site. And I think it's been that these amber beads, I think that to me they're gorgeous, and I'd like to see images of this, but that was not what I could find, because it's been these sort of discussions been sort of focused mostly on, dominated on by these buildings. But it would be interesting, I think, maybe to look at the religious significance of the art that they had, which is anthropomorphic figurines and ivory engravings. So maybe see if that had any relationship to how this site is being run, if they were all dwellings, or if some of them were workshops and some of them were maybe like a place of worship. Maybe it would be interesting to see if that would then reflect on any other site. Like I said, at comparative archaeology, if you look at one site and see if there's a site that's similar, try and see if there's any similarities and differences, and see if there's any interpretations you can cross over. That can sometimes help you. So maybe using this site further, just because of how rich the archaeology is here, we can possibly get a better perspective on the other sites. This site had also found in the pits that there was burnt animal bone, but the animal bone that was present was found to be of hare and mammoth mostly. But there was also small elements of other animals which possibly not be something that they came into contact with quite often, which was the woolly rhinoceros, the cave lion, the wolverine, the horse, reindeer, bison, brown bear, fox and wolf. So there's a mixture there, and I think it also shows how rich wildlife was at this time. So again, I think another perspective that you could get onto this period. But this had shown evidence that these animals were butchered and consumed on the site. And the sheer amount of it, I think, also suggests this to be quite a large community rather than just quite a few groups of families. And obviously they've got to have a way of communication. So I think that they're definitely got to have a way of communication with their own community, but definitely with other areas if they're able to trade as well. And like I said, they might have, there was little to none wood charcoal, but there was a lack of wood. Wood might suggest that the charcoal, some bits of charcoal that was found there was small amounts of it, and it was very kept close to them. But this Mesozoic area, they've also discussed further about the data, has also been opened up a little bit bigger at this point due to some of the artifacts to be in 18,000 to 12,000 years ago. But that was also based on the radiocarbon data they were able to produce from the architecture as well. And one thing that they named to be one of the ways of analysing this data was AMS, accelerator mass spectrometry, radiocarbon date, which it was a more developed way of radiocarbon dating basically than before. This was able to give you a more closer timeline, which is what I've also discussed, of how this site was thought to be between 18,000 to 12,000. Then it was moved to 15,000 to 14,000, and now it's between 14,850 to 14,315. So it's quite interesting to see how technology has definitely impacted these sites and how we're able to see it, because we're able to have a more clear time frame. But this is the site, Mesozoic site. This is the site that was in 1965. A local farmer had discovered this site, and he told local archaeologists. And with that, then it was excavated between 1966 to 1989. And this had seen a global effort really to try and discover more and more about these sites. But what was quite interesting was that in the 90s, UK, US and Russia were the ones that were quite dominant in investigating this area. So it's nice to see that there was all different types of efforts from all different types of nations and regions, because I think also opens up interpretation, especially this is an anomaly in what people think of this time period. People seem to think that they were living in caves or nothing really sophisticated, but I think this is something that really proves you wrong, and I think does them justice in a significant way. And they think that this is discussion on how they've been able to collect these bones due to dates as well. There's been a discussion, but scholars have really wanted to crack down next of how they were able to get these bones, and they were looking at this ring here, and they were either thinking of maybe hunting, maybe natural accumulation of dead animals nearby, maybe all different types of interpretation. But they looked further into maybe what the ring means symbolically to Neanderthal beliefs, and they believe that this was a result of maybe sort of seeing it as like a continuous thing of time. But I think that went down quite a bit of a rabbit hole, and it'd be quite interesting to see what they could come up with that. But they believe that maybe this could be related to beliefs, that's why they were circular. But there were some colleagues that argued that there was working on this site that the structure was purposely built as maybe protection from cold and acid, simple as that, and saying that it was beliefs of some sort of worship was completely just crazy, and to have a circular pit is probably better in the cold, windy weather. But they had a look at the bones, and they were able to look at them externally and sort of mark down how much they were in size. And when they were looking at that, they were able to look at this structure, and this structure was able to show that there was 116 complete mammoth bones found there, which was including 12 skulls, 5 mandibles, 15 tusks, 12 pelvises, and 15 long bones. So if we go back to the plan maybe and just sort of point them out. So 12 skulls here, and then 5 of these mandibles here, and 14 tusks. So that's 7 mammoths used for tusks, and they don't really add up to the amount that they have. 12 skulls would suggest 12 mammoths, but the tusks would suggest that there was only 6. So I think it does show the picking and choosing just for what they needed for each dwelling, etc. And it also found 34 pelvises as well, and 51 long bones as well, which is quite interesting. I think these ones here. So I think I think that's quite interesting. But they said on a whole that about 15 individual mammoths were possibly used completely, and this was a mixture of male and female. It was there was nothing specific about it, and there was also adults and younger mammoths used as well. So it wasn't specific. I think it also reinforces that thing of waste. They weren't picky whether it was male or female or young or old. It was just resources for them that was easily accessible. And like I said, they were intentionally selected and assembled to build this circular structure, and I think a lot of time and effort, which then reinforces that thing that I opened up with. Why would it be a temporary area of living the community if you've got all this time and effort to think about how you structure it? How they've clearly, again, it's trial and error. They know that circular structures possibly would deal with the area better than they knew about the animal skin and keeping insulation. So again, in tune with their area and using everything to the fullest. But the bones that were found in the pit as well, they were able to show cut marks of butchering activities. So that's why I said that there was evidence of them being butchered and consumed on the site, is because they've looked at some of the bones of some animals, and they were able to just find the cut marks. And what's quite interesting is that the Moldova site as well, that's another significant site that was found in 1928. This was excavated between 1931 and 1932, but it was quite interesting how they were able to come to that conclusion, because they also revisited it back in the 80s, and they also call that, from what I've discussed, the 80s also being a time of improvement and development in archaeology in terms of technology. So it was almost like a new archaeology, and I think going back with fresh eyes was the right thing to do. But I think now in the 21st century, some of these sites need to be re-examined, I think, to just find more evidence to suggest. But looking at these sites, you can see all the different bones they've tried to reinterpret to create them. And they're definitely following that idea that they've had from some of the well-preserved sites. I'm trying to see if there's any that they've recreated with skulls on them, because I have seen, there you go, there's another recreation that I thought was quite interesting, because you could see how all of them have had similar ideas, but they've been changed in some sort of way. But they are using the Mesorik site in terms of the mandibles being used and the pelvises, etc., for the bottom part, but using skulls maybe at the top in a dome shape. So very interesting, and very interesting the different interpretations they've had in how they look. And I think it just ultimately shows that we're still in the early stages of understanding that site. And definitely the different changes in interpretation, some of them are perfectly circular and some of them are oval. So I think that just shows the mixture of evidence as well, depending on what site that you look at, depends on how oval or small circular they are. But from what I've read as well, there's been stacked mammoth bones, but they were mostly the femora that was used as well. As well as the innermotates and the scapulae used for just creating all this. But like I said, another site that has been hyped up for these big sites, in the Kowalski site, 149 mammals were used just for parts, and it did have 10 large pits nearby as well, which were 2 to 3 meters in diameter, and when you look at the depth, they were about 7 to 1.1 meters, so it was quite a range. But I think ultimately what we need to gather from it is, yes, I think it just shows that we need to give them more credit for what they've done, because of the technological advancements they have in their stonework and their tools, in their architecture. So that's all important, I think, to show startings of a civilized community. But you also have this signs of art being used, mobile art, maybe that being something to do with the family or ceremonial things and beliefs, and even the ambit of the trade. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they were a very advanced and well-developed community that we need to further examine, to look at these, especially look at if there's any evidence of religious beliefs. I think if there's one site that has a lot of this evidence, I think there would definitely be some more evidence from other sites, and it's maybe not been discussed as of yet, but they're definitely interesting because it makes you think of the plan of how these areas actually worked, and by what I mean by that is how each of the society functioned. Was they having a sort of hierarchy where they were having families, like Del said, where they were having families dwelling together in some groups, and then they had a bigger house of the main for the most important group of the society. It comes to very interesting discussions, and I think the discussions at the moment have been mostly on the dating for a considerable amount of years, and now more needs to be focused on what we can gather socially from there as well. But I think having evidence of art and these other well-detailed anthropomorphic art also shows to us that they're not as barbaric as what people like to portray them as well, because if they were going out there fighting all the time and killing all the time, which also further adds that the mammoths weren't something that was hunted all the time, I think it just shows us that they weren't constantly out there hunting, they weren't out there fighting, especially with the trade that they were having good connections with other people for resources. And I think the amount of flint and tools that they found maybe was showing evidence that these sites could have been hubs of trade for Neanderthals tools. So I think you can go down that route of just seeing like a very prehistoric civilized society being formed, really, if you want to call it that. That's what it sort of seems like to me. And I think that would be quite interesting. I think what would be quite interesting is any burial sites maybe nearby that could tell us more about identity. But identity is also another topic that you could bring into this, of how they're able to portray it in their architecture, in the tools. Yeah, definitely an interesting topic. So I'll stop sharing and I'll ask everyone some questions. But I want to say thank you for that as well. I quite enjoyed this week. So I'll pass it over to Del and ask if there's any questions that he'd like to ask.
Well, of course.
Go on, Del, fire away.
No. I mean, we're looking at one of the pictures showed a large sort of structure which could have housed, say, 3-4 families, and then a couple of little round ones around. What came to mind to me was obviously one of the littler ones could have been the shaman, because they would have wanted to be not so much secretive, but there were things they probably did and rituals they didn't want anybody to know about.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of, you know, what they did. The other one is to do with modern societies in places like Africa, Asia, South America, so-called tribal. I don't like that word, but and I won't use the word primitive because I don't believe they are. But one of the huts could have been a confinement hut for women, you know, a monthly hut, for want of a better expression, you know, because that could have been taboo.
There was one thing that I forgot to mention, which was quite interesting, is that they didn't really sort of discuss if there was any differences in roles for genders as well. So again, could be something that they could go down to as well, and figuring out the use of the huts based on confinement, etc.
Looking at sort of
it's still there.
Lost him.
I think he went. I think I'll ask Pat next. Is there anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Oh, I was looking at that lady sitting in the middle of all those bones. I wonder if that was a hut that had collapsed, and that's what she was looking at, is it?
Yeah, no, definitely, especially when you look at the recreation, especially the one with the skulls on the top, I think the way that it is all fallen, because you see the perfect circle, so I think it does show evidence of it collapsing. Yeah, no, thank you for that, Pat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bill, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Yeah, I don't go along with the idea that these homes were built entirely of mammoth bones, because there's a simpler way of actually building a structure to live in. Obviously, they had flint tools because there's evidence of butchering, which means they had sharp implements. And at the time, obviously, that part of the world was heavily forested. So the timber supply would be immense. So the excavation going on in the second illustration you showed didn't come to any conclusion about post holes. So if you're going to build a building, if they found post holes there, you would have made a timber structure with a frame. And yes, if you want to do the lower walls as a decorative item or status item, yeah, that's fine, you know. And then use the hides on the mammoth to actually cover it like a tent arrangement, if you like. That's the simplest way of doing things. So I just don't accept this idea that everything was made out of bones. It's not practical to do it. It's not. Partly yes, but mainly timber and bones. And if there's evidence of post holes, I'll give you some idea of the depth and the size of the timbers to actually make the structure. So that's my view about this. You know, so certainly it's pretty decorative, isn't it? The way these V-shaped bones on the perimeter, the lower perimeter, looks great, doesn't it? But just that is decorative. It's not. It doesn't have any constructional strength to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. I think I think there would be the need for timber for structure.
Well, you've got to look at the practical of your materials available, what tools you got, and how do you go about it in the simplest, most effective way. That's the way to look at it, and that's the way I look at it, and I think we should all look at it, you know. So it's all very well to look at these fine reconstructions in bone, you know, but in practice, I don't think that was the case at all. But there we are. That's my view.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Henry, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
The only question I had to ask was, have they found any human bones amongst all of the bones?
From what I've read, no. And that's something that I would like to sort of focus on, especially if there was any burials nearby as well. Because it just seems at the moment that they just seem to be huts and no evidence of, you know, it just looks like it's been abandoned with everything left there. So, no, there hasn't been at the moment, but hopefully there is in the future.
Okay, no, thank you.
No, thank you. Anne, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
I'm sorry I left you for for about 10 minutes. My battery went.
Oh no.
Well, it's sort of. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
you've frozen, but you keep
Am
Okay.
I?
yeah.
Oh, I was only going to say that it's. When did Mammoth die out?
1,400 years ago.
When was that cataclysmic event? When? Can you hear me? No.
Anne,
Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't think she can hear us. This does say
I was going to say, when did that happen? You know, because
Oh, Anne.
oh God, what's he going me for?
Can you hear us now, Anne?
She's gone.
I think she's gone.
She's gone.
So I think that's everyone asked. Del disappeared. Anne's disappeared. And I had connection issues. So clearly something's testing us today. But no, thank you everyone for that. Thank you for coming today as well. So that's the end for me. I'll leave you to Carl if he wants to say anything before he leaves.
Thank you very much, Jess.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
My phone says this is some of the oldest surviving architecture in
Yes.
the world. Oldest surviving architecture. So, you know.
Very good, well preserved as well. Definitely. So, Carl, is there anything that you'd like to say before everyone goes?
Or disappears.
He's gone. He's gone.
Anne, are you okay? No, I think she's got internet connection problems.
We're having a breakdown.
So yeah, no, I'll see any of you that do tonight later as well. And take care. I'll see you guys soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week.
And you, bye.
Bye. There we go.
Hello,
Hi, Carl.
I'm here. Right.
Everyone's gone. I think
yeah,
Anne and Bill is still here though.
Oh. So, anyone wanted to say anything? No.
I don't know if Anne's having problems with the connection because I can see her talking and moving, but I can't hear her.
All right. Did anyone want to ask anything? They're gone.
Go on.
That was it.
Oh, that was it, is it?
Oh, that was it. I just wanted to know if any. So, everything's okay for tonight, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna reboot my laptop and sort of get it all fresh up and started so we don't have any issues later.
Yeah, the sound's a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just having enough really. Oh, Anne's back. I think is she back?
Yeah. Okay. I think she's had a bit of a nightmare. Owen's on as well.
Who's on?
Oh, Owen's phoning me now. Owen, yeah. I'm actually come online. hang on a minute. I can't hear you. Hang on. Yeah, go on.
I just wanted to apologise because my iPad suddenly cut out.
Oh no, that's fine. It's fine.
Oh, right. His iPad suddenly cut out.
Yeah, tell him Anne's had problems as well. It's not been a good day for all of us.
I thought I'd plugged it in, but I hadn't put the switch on.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it died. So apologies for being cut out suddenly.
Well, Jessica's really gutted. She's crying. Yeah, she's there are tears in her eyes. What? So yeah, no, that's fine. So we'll see you next week then, yeah?
Yeah, lovely. Okay.
So yeah, no, anything you want to ask me while you're there?
Really enjoyed today.
Oh, good.
Oh, bless him.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay then. Okay, we'll see you. We'll see you soon then.
Next week, Wednesday. Yeah, bye.
Oh, I got to put up with you Wednesday. Have I? All right then. See you, Del. Bye. Bye.
No,
Okay.
that was a good lesson.
Good.
Am I solo this evening or no?
Who do you have this evening? You have.
Anne,
Oh,
Richard,
you got Anne again, have you? Oh God.
Ellen.
You've got Anne again this evening. All right then. So nobody had anything to ask me, did they, or whatever?
No, I asked them that and they said no, and I said, but basically I just was saying, I'll pass it to Carl if he's got anything to say, and there was nothing being said. I gave him about 5 minutes and then they left.
Yeah, you had a nat. I did actually say something, but nobody replied.
What did you say?
Anne was on about the bloody mammoth.
Oh yeah, I heard what you said. Yeah, no, I think Anne couldn't hear you because she was having internet problems at that point, and that's when she left, and then come back and left again and come back.
Ah, so she did do that bit either then.
No.
Right, okay.
It's a bit like a séance, isn't it, Zoom? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it is. It's getting a bit bizarre.
Make a noise if you can hear me. You
So,
there?
Oh well, you lost Del then and Anne at the end, so.
Yeah, and then it was my connection, so I don't know, something's probably out for me today.
All right then.
Bad luck goes in threes, Carl. So I've got another 2 things to go wrong right now.
All right, great. Okay, brilliant. Anyway, well done on that today. So as long as you that went well then, so.
Yeah, no, cool. Will I see you later, or is it just me?
Oh God, who does? Yeah, I come on tonight, don't I? I sort of hover in the background.
Yeah, you sometimes do. It's a mixture.
Yeah, I'll hover around in the background tonight.
Okay, that's cool. I'll see you then.
Make sure you're not saying any defamatory things about the Pope or something, you know.
No, we're talking about the Civil War, but the medicine archaeology there.
Oh, the British Civil War, yeah?
No, American.
Oh, right, okay. The American Civil War really particularly upsets me, and I can't go into details why, but it's just like...
Yeah, no, I know what sort of history it is. It's something because I just wanted to look at the archaeology of medicine there. So I'm looking at the things that you pull the teeth out with and amputation tools. So it doesn't really go much into what happened with it because I know it's a very sensitive topic and I didn't really want to go into it if that made sense.
I'm very much on the Confederate side, so yes, I always have been.
But we got a Confederate flag in my house.
Yeah.
Not for bad reasons, but because I think it has been reclaimed by groups for a negative way.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. I don't think it's anything to do with slavery, but that's life. Well, it was nothing to do with slavery because everyone kept slaves in the north and the south. It was just like it was an issue at the end. That was it.
Yeah. No, I don't go down that route, thank God. I just look at like one particular excavation found a jar full of rusty nails that they think was evidence of a witch doctor as well. So just little things like that. Yeah, no, it was coming up with some interesting interpretations. So, and it's nice artifacts for this one as well.
Okay, good.
I'll see you then, Carl.
Okay, look, I'll see you then. I'll have to end the recording, won't I? Okay, we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
See you
Bye.
tonight. See you tonight. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Well done. Bye. Bye. Managed to come in at the last minute there. Live streaming. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Anyone out there? I'm off. Let's finish the live stream.